So hi again. I'm Srishti Prabha from India Currents. We're based in the Bay Area, so
Cool.
majorly California stuff.
Cool.
I know you guys went to USC. I did a little bit of research, so I don't know if you're familiar with India Currents at all.
I'm not, unfortunately. No.
It's okay.
Sorry. Sorry.
No,
But
it's okay. I'll just give you a little rundown so that you feel like you have a little bit of context. The magazine started in 30 years ago, around the time that like our immigrant parents started coming to California. So it started in San Jose. That's where I'm from. That's where I'm based. And basically, we just kind of do reporting on all things. I'm actually the managing editor right now, but I
right.
watched the movie, so I thought it'd be cool to get a little bit more insight.
Totally. Yeah.
Cool. So I guess we'll start with an easy question. What was your directorial vision for this film?
So I think that our vision is we really wanted to tell the story of an Indian matriarch, but not in this sort of typical stereotypical way that a lot of that I think most Western TV shows when you see an Indian mother, it's always this overbearing stereotype, and so we really wanted to show someone who has a nuanced, layered past, who has a background, who has lived a full life, and her full life and that history comes through in the movie and come through in a genre in a genre thriller. So it's both you have that character piece and it's very accessible to audiences.
Hmm. Did you want to add anything also?
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically it's, just like Elon said, I think also we both love the idea of taking this audio play, which was originally, but finding a way to make it cinematic. To kind of, I mean, a lot of our directorial vision was literally just how do you make this visual? Like, what is and so I think that meant adding flashbacks, that meant kind of visualizing the mom's kind of descent into hysteria and madness, basically, even as she's kind of imagining it, but also ultimately the film is a commentary on domestic abuse and on the sort of cycle of violence. And I think that was a lot of like, we always want a deeper thematic core to any movie that we do. And so I think it was important to us to make sure that came across.
Very interesting. Yeah, I definitely picked up on that. You
Hmm.
had a lot of cultural undertones, not even undertones, they're like overtones because it's very Indian
Sure.
American, right? Indian
Sure.
American.
Hmm.
So keeping that in mind, like what were your cultural influences? Because I personally saw them and it was interesting. But I don't know how much actually talked to the writer a little bit before. So just like how what do you think the impact of your narrative is? Like your of the fact that you're bringing in the concept of the evil eye, which is very
Hmm.
common in Hindu culture and many other cultures, but definitely predominantly Hindu cultures. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a big part of it. I think anytime you do really any story, but especially genre stories, there's always a certain context to be kind of laid down. And I think taking a very universal context of like a mother wanting the best for her daughter, but then putting it through the lens of a very specific context, the kind of arranged marriage idea. But I think normalizing it. So I think a big part of it was using the culture, but using it in a way that people understand it's not, that I think a lot of Americans have misconceptions about exactly what India actually is like. What are people in it, like what is the culture like? The thing that, it's always the balance. It's like, you want to tell a very specific story because that makes it more interesting, but you want it to kind of resonate universally. And so I think we always look for that sort of like what's unique about a situation, but we want to make sure it's understandable. And we love the idea that people like understand better how do Indians see the evil eye, what does reincarnation actually mean, even though we're of course using it in our own specific way for this film. So yeah.
Cool. Um, Obviously, the theme, the kind of the visual effects that you guys did seemed inspired by other horror films. So I was just wondering which ones were they? Like, where were you pulling your inspiration from?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, there are a lot of films that we've looked at in terms of how to approach this idea of sort of obsession, and as well as this, especially in the flashbacks. I mean, you can go to sort of classical films like Get Out, and some of the ones that have had a flood of influence, where you're really trying to demonstrate somebody who is
thinks that they're losing it, or they don't know what's happening.
It's like Unsane, Babadook. I think there's
Babadook.
I mean, even Sixth Sense. There have been a lot of films where someone isn't sure if they're going crazy or not, and I think like looking at sort of those visual cues, as well as films that that I think we also looked at, for example, like The Farewell. Films about cultures colliding, about first gen immigrants and like first gen kids, I think, trying to navigate their parents' culture. And I think there's sort of there's a lot of visual juxtaposition to be done with like Pallavi versus her mom, and we're literally just because we're like literally cutting between the two countries constantly. So
I'll also say that we also looked at like Hitchcock and like some of the classics who really went into this kind of psychological drama that I think is just not made as much today. And I think that he did a lot of this in Vertigo and in Psycho and in some of his other films that dealt with people who didn't know what was going on around them.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking a little bit. I think you mentioned, kind of bridging the gap between the two cultures, and just how heavily did you feel like you could lean in creating something for such a wide audience and using like some context from films that are first gen immigrants, and then also using things like Hitchcock, which are just much older genre of horror. Like, how did you kind of get all of those ideas together, because they seem kind of disparate? So
yeah, I mean, the reality is that, I mean, when you make a film, you're using elements, but they all have to coalesce into a singular vision. And I think what we've always found is that I think if you try and please too many people, you basically please nobody. That like the more specific story that you do, the more universal it actually becomes. And so I think honestly, honesty is the goal. So honestly, our main goal always was be true to these characters, be true to how the story would actually happen. And I think we sort of knew if the characters are acting truthfully, and if the film feels truthful, that's will speak to a very broad audience. Like we did, and also, by the way, in the streaming age, I think it's sort of allowed this sort of golden age of more unique stories to be told. Things that wouldn't necessarily have worked theatrically 5 years ago are absolutely being greenlit now. And I think audiences are craving more unique and just a bigger variety of stories. So
yeah, I also think that the idea is to make a film that we would want to see. So something that has those elements. I mean, we can incorporate things from all different films, but really it's just like I'm making the version of this story that we want to see on screen.
Interesting. And I actually had like a very it's a little bit of a confusing note, and it might seem random to you, but
that's okay. Yeah.
I noticed that in the film, Pallavi, played by Sunita Mani, isn't wearing pants in a few scenes, and the guy is fully clothed, and it's like intimate scenes, or they're in the bed, and I was like, why is this a directorial choice? Like, why did you choose to do that?
It's a good question. That's a good question.
So it's basically it's two scenes. So and I know exactly the scenes you're talking about. And in both scenes, so in the first one they're in bed, I'm not even sure what.
Wearing a belt.
Yeah.
I was like, why is he wearing a belt?
I can't quite remember why that choice was made. It's a very good point. I will say our dad literally pointed out the second scene, which is having breakfast, and then she talks to her mom on the phone. In that one, I will say Madhuri wrote that as like her, and actually that was meant. There's actually a scene, to be fair. There's a scene where Sandeep proposes to Pallavi. That's actually not in the film. That like we ended up cutting for various reasons. But so it was meant to be the very next morning when her mother called. So it was meant to be kind of like a post night, like a very fun night, basically following this this proposal. But it is a good point. I mean, Pallavi could easily have been wearing pants in either scene.
So I think a part of it too. I mean, a part of it as well. Remember that in discussion, even with the costume designer and with Sunita, when looking is, a lot of it is how Sunita's world, or is how Pallavi's world it changes in the movie. So there is an element to which he, Sandeep is manipulating her, that he is psychologically pushing her to be the kind of woman that he wants her to be. And so Pallavi is also finding that she she is giving in to this idea, and it's
being sort of the arm candy, so to speak.
And it's also in contrast to her mom, who, so they are in such different worlds that I think that we also wanted to contrast those two worlds. Now, I completely get your point that, you know, is it a male gaze kind of thing?
But there is some, I mean, like, to be fair, there is some level of power dynamic, the idea that after they've made love, he put pants back on and she doesn't. Like, he's sort of almost like a dominance kind of thing. Now, you know, like that sounds like maybe an excuse, and maybe it is, but it's
it might be. It might be. It's true.
So yeah.
Well, I'm not even criticizing. I was just honestly, the information you've given me is more insightful than what I do think. It didn't really make, maybe it's the things that got cut kind of didn't lead up to those moments, and when they got cut, it just created a weird narrative, and you didn't see that connection between him being super manipulative to, like, all of a sudden she's not wearing pants in a few scenes and he is, and like you're just like, why? And are you trying to make her super contemporary? Like, is that what you imagine a contemporary Indian woman to be in America? Or, you know, so anyways, I have to wrap up, but it was good to hear your response. Thank you so much for talking with me.
No worries. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it's a fun note, though. We will think about that for sure. Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.